fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds, got a fun one here today. It's a really cool story. Old Captain Jay Weathers, guy that was, I'm going to say, schlepping diamonds and jewelry up in Ohio, was traveling quite a bit down to Florida and South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia. Love fishing, always love fishing, and found a way to leave the old business and start a fishing charter business in the Port Charlotte area, not knowing the waters at all, and now has come like a crazy far way. Now has his own fishing show called Guidelines, which is awesome, by the way, and just a great guy and has some amazing stories. So, Captain Jay, welcome, brother.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Hey, it's an honor to be on here. I'm super pumped about this. I think we're going to have some fun.
Oh, we are going to have some fun. And before we get into it, we always tell our listeners, especially if they're still listening here in October, November of 2019. I know some people listen to shows like way past. So if you're still listening in October, November of 2019, we have a really cool giveaway where you can go fishing with my brother Luke and I and 9 others. We're doing a contest. It's a completely free giveaway. And all we need from you, it's completely free, is just to go to iTunes or Stitcher, the 2 main places that our podcast plays, and leave us a review. And obviously subscribe to us, but leave us a review, preferably 5-star, and take a picture or a screenshot and send it in. We're going to be doing all kinds of free hats and shirts, just giving away stuff at the end of, I guess, early December. And it's completely free. All you have to do is go do that. And then here's the big thing that we're doing to try to do this trip. So, and Jay, maybe you might not know this either. A lot of people didn't. I didn't when I got into podcasting. But like the one thing that you can't really fake, like on Instagram and some places you can kind of fake followers and buy followers. The one thing you cannot fake on iTunes are the reviews, and that's kind of like your status, like of how big your podcast is based on reviews, especially 5-star reviews. You can't buy them, like especially iTunes. I mean, they make sure that you're legit. I mean, they ask for everything before you can get an iTunes account. So right now, I think we're number 2 or 3 in all of iTunes for fishing, definitely for saltwater fishing. We're number 1, number 2. And the one that's beaten us is Orvis. Orvis, dude. I don't know how. I've listened to him, and I like Orvis. This is like a friendly rivalry. And we own Orvis fly rods and reels. Like, they're great product. But man, like they go for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, like talking about fur patterns and fly patterns. And I mean, it's just like, how many times can you talk about catching steelhead? And I was like, oh my, I don't know. Anyhow, I love their podcast. It's great. Obviously gets a lot of reviews, but we're trying to beat them. So we need your help. If you guys want to help support us and win an awesome free trip and tons of free gear, all you have to do, once again, iTunes or Stitcher, give us a review, take a screenshot, and email it in to fish@saltstrong.com. We will automatically enter you in, and we'll be picking all the winners the first week of December. So now that that's out of the way, Captain Jay, what's the backstory, dude? From Ohio, schlepping jewelry? What happened?
I've got a much different background, I think, than what I guess would be the pictured as a charter captain background. But I was a diamond dealer and jewelry designer for about 15 years in Ohio, and to be honest with you, it was good. The diamond business was good. My wife and I, this coming March, will be celebrating 25 years of marriage. So she's been with me through all of that, and of course now the guide business. But there's something to say about that business was great and all, but there were some elements of it that I didn't particularly care for, and that was didn't necessarily have a lot to do with the diamonds. It had a lot to do with the weather in Ohio. So it's needless to say, not my favorite. I hate to be cold. I hate sleet and snow. And I was in, suit and tie 6 to 7 days a week, horrible schedule. And, I actually like my wife, and I wanted to spend some time with her, and I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to do that. And you start, sitting back and just wondering, am I going to be able to do that for another 30 years? And at that time, the answer was no. And, it was a total 180 compared to, what I was currently doing and successful at it. I won Jewelers of America design show, with a custom butterfly diamond pendant I made. So we had a lot of fun. I mean, it was good to us, but there's a phrase I've always heard. It's something like, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And, it's a little cliche, but I think that, it makes a lot of sense. And those that are listening to this, understand if they're doing something they absolutely love, it's not like going to work. And, the short version is, I don't know how long this podcast is supposed to last, but the short version is, when in the diamond business, they have trade shows no different than what the fishing industry has. And not once and ever they ever send jewelers to cold places for these trade shows. So they would send us to Savannah, Georgia, the Carolinas, Orlando, of course, San Diego, California, cool places to visit. Well, while I visited those places for the trade shows, we always had some time in between, either before the show or after the show, to maybe do a little fishing. So I hired a bunch of guides over those years, and, I got to see, I suppose the good, bad, and the ugly, whether it be incredible guides to some guides that maybe could have used some equipment upgrades. But I fell in love with Florida. I have some family in Bradenton, and when I came to Orlando for a trade show, I hired a guide out of Anna Maria Islands. That gentleman still guides there today. If I can say his name, Matt Riccoli. That guy doesn't know it. He and I have spoken in the last, 4 or 5 times in the last 10 years since I've moved. But I hired that guide, and he had an 18-foot flatboat at the time. The guy had flip-flops, shorts, and T-shirt, and we had a great day, and I paid him $500, and the next day I jumped back on a plane and to Ohio, and it was snowing and sleeting and suit and tie, and that's when it clicked. So this is not what I need to be doing. And, there's always a backstory to that. I mean, I grew up fishing largemouth bass and crappies, as some folks in Florida call them specks. But the real is I had fishing in my background, and I was super passionate about them. I told my grandfather when I was like 16 years old that I was going to be a professional fisherman. Of course, at that time, I thought I was going to be the next, Bassmaster Classic guy. Yep. But reality is things took a little different turn than that. But yeah, I came down, and following that trip, probably 2 or 3 years go by, and I came down to Florida in 2001. I was actually here during 9/11, oddly enough, which is a horrible time to be traveling. Yeah. But I came down to Charlotte Harbor because I looked back, Joe, remember when we used to use the Atlas, right? That was me. And I just looked on the West Coast, and I just kind of looked at areas that I thought, could be a cool place to visit. And I saw Charlotte Harbor. And when I flew down here, I spent some time here in Charlotte Harbor with the idea of going fishing, but I never fished Charlotte Harbor. I came down here and just looked at some properties, hung out at tackle shops, just listened to all the fishing stories that were coming in to the tackle shops, and really just jumped back on a plane, took my wife to a Monday Night Football game when I got back to Ohio, and said, "Hey, babe, what do you say about moving to Florida? And I'll be a fishing guide."
And you're still full time in Diamond, like you haven't quit your job or anything.
Oh yeah, no, I'm full swing Diamond mode, and that conversation, there was a long pause, but she totally got where I was coming from, and she could see that at a certain point, that I hate to use the word burnt out in the diamond business, but it wasn't like reaching my full attention like it should have, like it did in my early 20s and even to early 30s. So she basically said, "Hey, you think we can do it? Let's do it." It took me 3 months, Joe. 3 months. I had basically everything we owned sold, and I moved to Florida in January of 2002 with 2 cats in the front of a U-Haul and my bass boat in tow.
Your bass boat?
Oh yeah, bass boat. That's what I did in Ohio, buddy. I thought for sure the bass boat was going to be no problem here in Southwest Florida.
All right, so this is crazy. Keep going.
Yeah, yeah. So I get here, and it didn't take me long to figure out the bass boat was no good. That's not going to cut it. So, I found out quickly, in order to get a captain license, you had to have so many hours on the water. So I went and bought a 1989 permit flat boat. Some of your listeners may know about a permit flat boat. It was actually made out of, I think, Cape Coral. But anyway, paid $6,000 for this flat boat. 1989, had a Yamaha Pro V on it, and it was running. It was ready to go, ready to fish. And I couldn't, from that point on, I fished almost on the daily.
Because you were unemployed, right? I mean, at this point, I assume, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I did some work for my stepfather who lives in Bradenton, just to, kind of keep some bills paid and without draining my savings accounts. But, there's a lot of fishing that can be done when you're unemployed.
Yeah.
Or at least have some flexibility in your schedule, which, I'm super grateful to my stepfather, because he knew what the plan was. He knew I wasn't going to be, his best employee on the planet. He knew I was there for a short window and that it was, but I went, got my captain license in October of 2003, and I basically went what I would call full time, meaning not taking any money out of my savings, in April of 2004, and been full time ever since, Joe. It's been the best move and the greatest thing I've done outside of married my wife. It's been an absolute crazy ride along the way. And I can't even tell you about the number of people that I've met that have been and now some of them are very good friends on that charter business. But it's been a cool ride, man, no doubt about it.
That's awesome. What was it like being an out-of-towner, going to a brand new spot and trying to stake down your flag and say, "Hey, I'm going to be a new guide here in this area. I'm from Ohio"?
Yeah, that was not an easy task, Joe. I was probably, without going into super detail, I was not super well liked when I moved to Florida. Not because I'm not a likable guy, it's just I moved to Florida to be a fishing guide.
And you showed up in a bass boat.
And I showed up in a bass boat, 100%. I'll own that. I should try to find some photos of that old bass boat. It was a beauty. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was probably buried way deep somewhere. But, no, the reality is I was the outsider coming into town to be a fishing guide, and nobody knew who I was. They just knew I was from Ohio. And I was coming down to take some of the, in their minds, take some of the business that these, full-time guides were already here. Some of them born and raised here. And, Joe, I was taught this by my grandfather. You know, a lot of respect is earned respect. In fact, the majority of it is earned respect. And I just rolled with the punches, kept to myself, did my own thing. I made a lot of mistakes, Joe. A lot of mistakes. I bought that little $6,000 flats boat because I knew I was likely going to put it on oyster bars and sandbars and get it stuck high and dry and just do a lot of wrong in that boat. But, you know, that's how you learn. And through time, maybe about 3 years worth, there was a little bit of gains and earned respect through some of those well-respected guides in the area. And there was one guy I'll say for sure that was different. And he's still probably Charlotte Harbor's premier guide, and it's Danny Latham. I don't know if you know Danny Latham.
Yeah, I know the name. Yeah, yep.
Yeah, he's the one guy that at a CCA banquet years and years ago, I'm talking maybe 04, maybe 03, right when I had to be 04 because that was in the spring CCA banquet. I met him, and he's the only guide of that time that actually had a conversation with me without basically, you know, like giving me the cold shoulder, like, you know, you're some guy from Ohio trying to be a fishing guide. But that guy, kudos to him. And I've told him that since we've become friends over the years. But I told him a long time ago that it was much appreciated, his response to me. But so earning respect was tough. But like anything, you keep your nose to the grindstone a little bit and do what you believe is right. And a lot of that started to come full circle, and you gain a little bit of that respect and get some nods from the guys where before it wasn't so friendly.
That's awesome. So
yeah,
I think the answer of what I asked could be super helpful because you basically have done what most people dream of doing, right? Which is, you know, going to a new spot and kind of mastering it. And yeah, that took you some time and certainly time on the water is a big part of the answer. But like looking back, what were some of those big aha moments? I mean, Charlotte Harbor, one is massive. It's like how do you even like break down the kind of areas you want to fish? And like, what were some of those big aha moments from, I would call you an ex-bass guy, you know, now trying to figure out local waters and trying to dial in redfish and snook and trout and tarpon?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question, Joe, because I've had that asked before, and I think a lot of it, my story kind of relates to a lot of folks that are moving here from different parts of the country, and it's all foreign to them. You know, it's a totally different body of water, totally different fishery, and you know, we just assume that everything we use back where we're home, it should work here. And that's not always the case. But so the answer to your question, when I moved to Charlotte Harbor and I started fishing, you know, I went at it in a little bit different, kind of a strategic way of learning the water. I literally bought a Charlotte Harbor chart and I bought a bunch of Thumbtacks. And I basically quadrant out, almost put zones on Charlotte Harbor. And I bet you I have that chart here at home somewhere.
And for you, I don't have it up. And for you younger listeners, he's basically talking about an online satellite map, but it's on paper.
Exactly right. Yeah, you're right. That chart may not exist anymore, but but this chart was 3x3. You know, it was big. And I had it up on my wall in my office, and I basically, you know, sectioned out different parts of Charlotte Harbor. And I made a point, Joe, to fish a particular section for 2 months straight. And I would do that on all different parts of the tide. And I would identify where I caught redfish, snook, maybe even some tarpon and some trout, by different color Thumbtacks. And I did that religiously I use the 2-month window as like when I can move to a different zone, right?
Got it.
And I circled around Charlotte Harbor. I don't know. I think I still circle around Charlotte Harbor, but as I was learning the different parts of the tide, and the reason it's important to know that 2-month window is I was able to see different tide heights, high and lows, at different stages throughout that zone. And it was important to me because I could figure out where those fish were going to be staging on the highs, where those fish were going to be staging on the lows. And one of my favorite baits to use in covering ground, trying to learn new areas, is topwater. You know, I'm a huge fan of topwater, and it's without going into the actual dynamics of the bait. You know how you can see the blow ups, and it's a very visual game, but you can cover a lot of ground with it. Yep. And even if I couldn't get them to always eat it, if I got them to rise up behind the topwater, that was a good stage at that point. And if I caught a redfish, you know, I would mark it on my GPS. I would come home, red thumbtack for redfish, and yellow for trout, and white for tarpon. And so we had a cool little chart hanging in my office that basically was dissecting Charlotte Harbor.
That's awesome. So how long did you do that for?
I did that religiously for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
6 years. Yeah. And you know what's funny is those thumbtacks are still very, very true to what still holds in those areas. The only thing that changed some of those is over the years, there's been storms clearly that have changed the dynamics of our shorelines, and of course, you know, our waters. Sometimes we're losing a little bit of grass, as I'm sure you've heard across the state. We've got some grass issues, and you know, when you don't have grass, you don't have forage, and you don't have fish. So that's the only thing that's really changed in those thumbtack points. But other than that, they're pretty solid. They're solid enough that I could go back to or send somebody to a spot and say, you're likely to catch some trout here on this particular tide. And that was, you know, you always hear sometimes guides or captains will use, you know, their book, you know, their log book.
Yep.
That was, for me, my log book. And while doing that, I was doing seminars. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what I was doing seminars. I had never done a seminar a day in my life. But what I could do is I could talk about fishing for redfish and snook in particular, which were similar in many ways to bass fishing. You know, I use some similar tackle. You know, the top waters that I use for bass fishing, I could still use to catch a redfish or a snook. So I use a lot of basic principles when I did seminars, and I still do a bunch of seminars. I probably do 10 to 15 seminars a year now. I went at it as total science-driven. Why are the fish here? Now I still ain't figured it out. I mean,
it's a never-ending puzzle, right? That's the whole thing.
It is a never-ending puzzle, and it's, you know, I mentioned to you before. It's like the great phrase of "tails and no fences." That's exactly what it is. They can swim in a given direction at a given time.
Yep.
But you know, history proves a lot of things, and you can see patterns that fall into place. And that's the only thing you can really, you know, hang your hat on is patterns. Whether they cooperate or not is a different game. You know, there's been many days that I've had super, super tough days on the water. But that goes without saying. If you're on the water 220, 230 days a year, you're going to have some tough days. there's not a guy on the planet that can say I rocked it every day. And if he does, he's got a different perspective on his social media game.
Yeah, I had Captain Mike Anderson on here on the podcast, and it was interesting. He said, Joe, he's like, this is general, but he's like, what I found after doing this for 25 years, he's like, in a given month, let's just say you got 30 days. He's like, about 14 to 15 days are going to be just awesome. Like you're dialed in. It feels easy. The trends hold true. Like it's working. And he's like, there's another 13 or 14 where it's just, it's a grind. And a couple of those days, like it's a really tough grind where like even the best of the best, no one's catching fish. And then there's a couple of days, just a coin toss where you just have no idea. And I thought that was good, honest feedback, because you're right. I mean, you could follow some people on social media and think all they do is catch tarpon and inshore slams every single day they go fishing. And some days are a grind, which is why it's so important to do what you've done, which is have a logbook or I call it like a little cheat sheet or your man. How many thumbtacks did you go through, by the way?
Well, what I did, there's quite a few of them on that board, but that board has since been taken down. It was taking up too much wall space. But reality is, thumbtacks were everywhere, right? Yeah. But that was a great. You know what's interesting about those thumbtacks, though? You could see just standing out away from that chart. You could see specific areas with an abundance of red tacks. Or which were for redfish, right? Or an abundance of areas that had yellow tacks, which were for trout. And the one thing that always circled back to is the type of bottom that was there. And as an example, since I use those red and yellows for the redfish and the trout, is I always found that the red tacks had an area that had either sandy bottom or crushed shell bottom mixed with grass, which I'd be finding the redfish. Yep. Mangrove shorelines that have a crushed shell bottom that comes away from the mangroves, maybe 5 yards, but then turns into turtle grass. That was a really key point for me finding consistency in finding those redfish. And then, just the opposite of that, the trout. When I would, look at all those thumbtacks and I'd look at the areas that I was finding those thumbtacks, a lot of it was deeper grass flats, anywhere between, say, on the shallow side, maybe 2 feet, the deeper side, 5 or 6 feet. But they all had similar bottom structures with that either grass for the trout or the crushed shell sandy bottom for the redfish.
That's awesome. And what about snook?
Yeah, so the snook, I found a lot of it with similar to those redfish with the shell, the crushed bottom, because as you know, snook have that flat chest, so they sit flat on the sand. A lot of times you'll find groups of them in sand holes, big patchy sections of grass, and those are key areas that I've always found here in Charlotte Harbor. Turtle Bay and Bull Bay are great locations for that because it has an abundance of sand holes. And those snook would really be kind of staged off. And again, you could just back away from that chart and look at the thumbtacks. You can see similarities of where those species are hanging. There was a couple that was like oddballs, right? Yep. But the overwhelming majority of the time, you could see a pattern just in the areas that they would be stationed in. And then many times, people at my seminars, everybody wants to know, where can you go tomorrow to catch them, right? Everybody wants the golden ticket. There's no Willy Wonka here. You actually have to spend some time on your trolling motor and cover some shorelines. Joe, there's been so many days I can't even count how many times I've gone out and had rods in the boat and did nothing but trolling motor shorelines. That sounds awful, doesn't it?
That's putting in time, brother. Putting in time.
Putting in the time, and that's exactly right, because you can see a crazy amount of activity and learn a lot just from your trolling motor. If you have your trolling motor in the water, going around shorelines, as boring as that sounds, you can see the bottom, what kind of bottom you have. If you have that crushed shell, it goes up to the mangroves. I fished a bunch of mangrove shorelines that had grass all the way up to the mangroves, and I struggle catching fish on those shorelines. I can go to a similar shoreline that has mangroves that are touching the water, that have crushed shell, the sandy bottom that's all the way out to even 4 or 5 yards from the mangroves, and I'll catch some redfish under that and some snook. So you wouldn't be able to do that if you just randomly went to a shoreline and started casting.
Yep.
But, unfortunately, in the industry we are in now, it's a lot of it's, I got to have the information right now, and where do I go?
Yeah.
We want everything so fast without always necessarily putting the work in.
What's the other main question that people ask? Do they say, like, hey, what's your favorite? Is it incoming tide, or what's another popular one you get?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask, that just what you said, what's my favorite tide? And I would probably say a falling tide is my favorite tide. 2 hours after the start of the fall. I just feel that right at the beginning, it doesn't happen like a, light switch when the tide graph says it's supposed to turn, right? It takes a little bit of time for it to really get ramped up going back the other way. And, funny enough, all the places that I fished that had crazy tides, like Savannah, Georgia has like a 7-foot tide swing,
yeah.
right? So Charlotte Harbor has, let's call it a 1.5 foot tide swing on an average. Well, that same 1.5 foot here in Charlotte Harbor is just as important as that 7-foot tide swing in Savannah, Georgia, because it is basically turning on the food conveyor belt. And when there's a buffet line moving, the fish are actively feeding. They know that's their window to get the bite, right? So I find myself loving the outgoing tide, and if I had a perfect world, after a couple hours the outgoing tide started, that's when I'd be really dialing in. You just gotta be cautious of where you're at, because if it drops out too much, you will be there for a little while.
Yep, and there, especially there in Charlotte Harbor, Placida, there's some shallow areas. Yes, there is, and I over the years, growing my business, I've been super fortunate to work with. I work with Maverick Boat Group, so I have a Pathfinder 25 hybrid, and then I have just in the last 3 or 4 years, I've got an HPXS. So very nice.
That Maverick is, in the wintertime, is money in Charlotte Harbor.
Yeah.
Because it's super shallow, like you just mentioned, and I can cover a lot of ground and get to areas where there's no chance I'd been able to get in my 25. So it's a great opportunity to utilize tools, which, in the very beginning I didn't have, but, with everything, tools is your life, right? So I try to utilize every bit of what I have, and what I feel will put me in the best position, or my clients in the best position to catch fish. And like we just hinted at, it's not always automatic. Sometimes, Joe, it's actually like work.
That's fun work. Like you said, I take the flip-flops and being out in the water all day long over the suit and tie, and traveling for diamond expos and stuff. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, in the diamond business, I don't want to make it sound like it was awful. It was really good for us, my wife and I. And I mean, I traveled to Antwerp, Belgium on diamond buying trips, and I had a lot of fun doing it. It's just, I think more than anything, the weather thing got to be an issue. I couldn't fish nearly as often as I wanted without having to drill holes in the ice, which I'm not a big fan of. So, and in Ohio, Florida is like the fish mecca, right? So that was and Florida's always been a big, in my mind,
that's where all the fish are, right? So it has been a true blessing to be able to do what I do, and I get to share it with a lot of people every year. And now I end up fishing a lot of repeat clients. Even like next May, I'm already booked for next May tarpon season.
Dang.
And it's just because, I have some really good clientele. I do a lot of corporate trips. And, bottom line is when you treat people with respect and have some good times and maybe catch a few fish here and there, they tend to come back.
Yep.
They love Charlotte Harbor. They love fishing. And if you can show them a good time and really just kind of put everything you can to that, that's really what has helped my business. I'm more of a people person than anything. I mean, I feel I could probably catch a few fish here and there, but I learned a long time ago it's not always about how many fish you catch.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely part entertainer, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Talk about the show and Silver Lining Charters and everything you're doing. Quick though, why we were talking about right now, since this is airing in the fall, what are some good fall tips for the weekend warrior, the guy or gal that's maybe only getting to fish? When we say weekend warrior, you know what that really means, right? You want to you imagine yourself fishing every weekend. If it's really like once a month. What are some tips?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of reaction baits in the fall. Our fall it's interesting here in Florida because although a lot of our winter residents come down here because it's warm, the fish are already starting to think it's starting to cool off. It's starting to get a little cold, but cold's a relative term, right? So I find myself using a lot of reaction baits. Something I can get those fish to really kind of come out of their skin to eat, because they know that window of feed as we get colder and colder through, call it December and January, it starts to get colder, and those baits I think will find those fish will find baits that are in their face. And they're more reactive to those because they're ready to feed. They know they need to feed up, particularly snook. So reaction baits, and those can be paddle tails on like an 8-ounce jig head, straight retrieve. It's one of the easiest baits that I can possibly think of, outside of maybe throwing a gold spoon on. But if I'm trying to mimic some of the bait fish that is right now all over Charlotte Harbor, a simple paddle tail. I personally have been using this Weston shad tease. It's a cool little bait. It looks just like our white bait here in Charlotte Harbor, and I'll burn it. I'll move it pretty quick with the idea of getting that reaction bite. Yep. But and of course early in the morning, Joe, if you were to pin me down and say what bait you going to throw right now, I'm throwing a topwater at least for the first 2.5-3 hours in the morning.
what brand do you like? Zara Spook, or do you like something different?
Well, so I've used a bunch. I think there's lots of different ones that have their own special sauce to them, but I use a couple different ones. I use the Shimano Cold Sniper right now because it's a bigger profile bait. And you can cast it a mile, but I also use those small little top pup smear lures. I've used I'm trying to think of all the different names. I've used some Usuris. There's a whole host of different top waters. But one thing that I will say about top water, at least for Charlotte Harbor and areas that have spooky fish or pressured fish, one of the things that I find that helps me with topwater is a bait that has either a low frequency knock, or no rattle, no knock at all. More effective with those than I am with something that's super loud or a high pitch clacking noise. Yep. I don't know. It's just, in my eyes, I've watched and seen different reactions from fish. If it's flat calm, the last thing I'm going to throw is a bait with a high pitch, heavy rattle. It's got a lot of chamber sound to it. If I had my perfect world, I would have a single one knock back and forth on a walk the dog. And you probably know this, but many anglers don't. A low pitch or a low knock, the low frequency travels further in water than a high frequency. So if I'm using a bait that has that low knock, I feel I'm drawing more fish in without spooking them from that high pitched sound.
Yep.
Charlotte Harbor especially has some pressured fish. So I find a bait that I can cast a long way, which is why I talk about that Cold Sniper. I can throw that thing a mile, and I actually use a lot of the one that's called a silent. It literally has no rattle in it. But when it's flat calm in the morning, early light, tough one to beat, buddy.
Love
tough
it.
one to beat.
And so what kind of areas, I know, just overall, the mindset is that as it does cool down and some cold fronts come through, that fish start pushing back. Maybe you're not fishing way up in the Peace River, but are you finding yourself going up a little bit farther in, or what types of areas and depths do you like to fish in the fall?
Yeah, so there's two things that I look for in areas that I'm going to fish. I want to see activity. I want to see life. So whether that be bait fish, meaning white bait, pilchards, pinfish, something within the grasses there, and or mullets. If I see groups of mullets, I'm going to concentrate on those areas because there's life there, right? So that changes as it gets colder and colder. And many times as it gets colder, those fish will keep pushing either way back in the shallows where there's some deep water drop-offs. So the fish, as the water cools, they have the option of dropping off into the deeper water. But during the day, when the sun comes up and heats that grass or that mud bottom, they can crawl up on top of that grass, and it's like a little sauna for them and warm up. One of my favorite times to fish is really that January, February time frame, where we're all wearing snow gear and beanies, but the fish are very receptive to some reaction baits. You can catch them on topwater. I mean, it's a lot of fun. But I find myself really kind of keying in on areas that I can see life in, and definitely kind of following through with that. And as we get colder and colder, a lot of that bait fish will start to disappear.
Yep.
So then I'll start targeting darker seagrasses, whether it be turtle grass. Sometimes you'll find that turtle grass surrounded by giant sand holes, and those fish will stage in those sand holes, and a lot of times right on the edge of the turtle grass and the sands. And basically, it's an ambush point, Joe. It's you fish this enough, that look, it right on the edge of those sand holes is a premier spot for any type of predator fish, whether it be snook, redfish, trout, whatever. They're going to be waiting on typically that uptide side, waiting for something to be slipped into the hole for them to eat. And I want to try to mimic that presentation. To finish that, the presentation is everything here. In our world, it's all about intersections and presentation. So if you can stage yourself up on a sand hole surrounded by turtle grass, and let's say the tide is sweeping from the right to the left. By the way, this is much easier to do if I'm doing a presentation in front of 60 to 70 people.
Yep.
But if you can imagine that sand hole in front of you and the tide sweeping from right to left, I want my presentation with whatever it's called, plastic or top whatever, I want it to be coming in to that sand hole the same direction that the tide is pulling a normal bait fish or a normal float. So, and just the opposite. I mean, in my mind, you wouldn't see a bait fish swimming into a sand hole from the down tide side. So it's just a natural. I use the conveyor belt thing, or the buffet line, because the buffet line, when the tide's moving, never stops. It's always filtering in bait fish, shrimp that are getting pushed out of the grass, mullet are coming down through it, and then it slows down with the tide to a stop, and then it eventually turns over where you'll start seeing the grass turn. And those are just key points for presentation to make sure that your bait is coming back the same direction that the tide is. That's like a super easy one.
Yep.
But many times gets overlooked.
Oh, for sure. And I did that when I was first learning. I mean, because it's a feel, right? You almost feel like, oh yeah, I feel like I'm doing a little bit more when you feel the drag and you're going against it. Like, yeah, go with it. And the opposite too, if you're using live bait, a lot of times you're going to free line and let the live bait, go with it. So you're casting it, or just tossing it way up ahead and letting it drift to the bait. But yeah, never are you trying to, how can you imagine a little bait fish or a pinfish going up there and like biting the butt of a snook or the tail, like spooking it? It just doesn't happen that way. So,
yeah, that's right. That's right. I think that there's a lot of anglers, that are new to an area or are just trying to figure it out. A lot of times we maybe overthink it. And I'll be the first to tell you, Joe, I'm a very technical angler. Like, I want to know why they're eating it, when they're eating it. Did they fall off that top water because it's not the right presentation, or why is it not happening, or why is it happening? So I try to dissect a lot of that, and I don't know if that's good or bad, because sometimes I even myself will try to overthink it. But I find myself, learning from every time I go out. Joe, I've been doing this almost 17 years, I guess. And every time I'm on the water, I learn something different, or I try to pick something different up. Because I see so many different scenarios, with clients on the boat that maybe don't get to fish very often. You give the guy the spin rod and he holds it upside down the first time. That guy you're going to have to work with a little bit. Yeah. But, we've all been there. So, that's where if I could show that person one little tidbit of the day, yeah, they're paying for the charter and we're having good times. But when they go fishing themselves the next time, I hope that they will remember, hey, you know what? We did this when we were with Jay. Let's see if that holds true here. And lo and behold, they catch a few fish, right?
I love it. Yep.
That's what I want to see happen,
Well, it's all about. So I want to position over, how the heck did you get the show? And by the way, it's awesome. The show's called Guidelines. If you guys haven't seen it, I know it's on Waypoint. You could say where any of their places is, but like, how did that come about? Was that always a dream or something? Or like, how do you all of a sudden, go from being kind of the new guy, and obviously you've built this up over many years now, and then all of a sudden have a really amazing, like, well-produced show?
Well, thank you. The show, as a kid, I've always thought, man, having a fishing show would be awesome, right? And there's some truth to that. It is awesome. But that said, I right now use Guidelines as basically a platform to share what it is, my passion about it, and what I want to see. Like, when I was traveling a little bit and going to different locations, that was a cool thing for me to see and do. And, staying here and guiding, yeah, I could tell you and show you some of the coolest things Charlotte Harbor has to offer. The show allows me to travel a little bit. I just got back from Charleston, fishing with a great guy, Peter Brown, up there, and also St. Augustine with Tommy Derringer. Not everybody gets to see that window, and for me to be able to bring that full circle with Guidelines, and I tell you, my production team, they are absolutely incredible. They make a little fishing guide look like he's got it figured out, right? So truth is, I'm learning as we go, and just having some fun, just sharing with the little detail things that I find that help in putting some fish to the boat. But yeah, it's we actually made, and I'll give a little backstory to this. Guidelines. I had a partner, Jeremy Lee, great dude. We had a growing pattern here where we're through season 1, and he has gone a different direction. So I'm running Guidelines full time right now. But when we started Guidelines, the idea behind Guidelines is really about, a fishing guide that on his day off, what does he do? Does he sit at home and just like out of the sun and doesn't want to talk to anybody? No. I want to be on the water. I want to be fishing. I want to do what I love to do. So I can only get so much of that while I'm on the boat with clients and watching rod tips. so this is a cool way for me to share, a little bit of the inside of what a guide does, and then now getting the opportunity to travel a little bit and kind of showcase some of these incredible locations that we've been to, and more to come, buddy. We've got some really, really cool stuff in the lineup for season 2.
I love it. Yeah, that's what the first time I saw the trailer, that's what I loved is this is what guides do on their day off, right? It's like the behind the scenes look of, and they're funny. Like, you guys kind of heckle each other in some of the episodes, and it's you're not having to be as serious because you're not sitting there with paying customers. It's just you guys being yourself and having fun. Yep. And it sounds like, so season 2 now, so Jeremy's not on there, and you're now going out with customers or other experts, other guys. Is that the whole thing? Yeah.
So now I had episode 1 of season 2 here with a really good client of mine, and John Kudo, which is an episode called One Up. And that guy I fished with for years, and it's always been guide client. And this time on the boat filming, it was a totally different game. I was like razzing him, giving him all kinds of grief, But now going forward, I get the opportunity to fish with guides that are leaders in their area, with destination wise, that really have the program dialed in. Many have done it. Been a guide for a long time, or even if they're not guides, maybe they're industry leaders, folks that have made an impact in the fishing industry. Those are the people that I want the opportunity to spin the bow with. That's really where you can kind of get to know somebody and kind of understand their story. And I've told my story many, many, many times, but I'm more interested in other people's kind of like how they got started doing what they're doing. Yep. Cause I can relate to it. It's my story only goes so far with me. Right. And I hear somebody else talking about, from their start where maybe they were fishing off their dock, mom and dad's dock off the edge of St. Augustine. That's cool stuff to me, and how it has come full circle for them. So I think you're going to see a lot of that with Guidelines. I think you're going to see a lot more of the technical side of things coming from me, and I may actually do that on a separate note, a separate video, kind of a behind the scenes of what we're doing while we're doing it, kind of breaking down the episode, if you will. I think people respond to that. They love the intel. They want to know why it is you're using that. And I think you'll find in our show, I'm not a huge fan of product splashing everything. Yeah. Right.
Placements on every second. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you'll find that. I mean, there's a time and place for it for sure. Of course, my sponsors would love to see that, but there's a time and place for it. There's a bit of a tax, that goes with it. And I think that if I can do this behind the scenes, kind of breaking down the episode, that's a great way for me to do it, whether it be Instagram Live or maybe Facebook Live, certainly posted up on YouTube. Things like that can be easily shared. And honestly, being on Waypoint's been a really cool thing for us because now, we're in the digital world, buddy. You know all about it.
Oh yeah. Is that that's the main place to watch it? Waypoint?
Yeah, Waypoint TV is my current host. They've been really good to me. Of course, we have YouTube and our own website. I had the website rebuilt back in May and has all our episodes on it. So it's guidelinestv.com. You can go there. Of course, YouTube. But the streaming show on Waypoint has incredible, we try to step it up the game a little bit on the production side of things. And we do that because I didn't want to be, if there's 100 fishing shows on TV, not all of them, in my opinion, probably should be on TV.
Yeah.
But that's why I wanted to really have some I guess value in the production, and I believe we've hit the mark on that.
Yeah,
so as long as I can continue to deliver on my end, I think Guideline's got some legs to it.
Love it, dude. All right, final thing here: tarpon tips. You've become the tarpon guy. How many charters did you have in May? Was it May of this year?
Yeah, so I did 42 trips in May. And I have done that for many, many years now. But I really just, for middle of April to middle of July, I only tarpon fish. With clients I have, for me, really, I think it comes down to I have more tarpon clients than I have tarpon days.
Because you do realize there's only 30 days in the month of May, and you went 43 times. So you're doing early morning, catching tarpon, dropping people off, picking more people up.
That's right. That's the 3.5 hours of sleep month.
Yep.
And it's a grind, but as you and I have spoken before, it's a situation where I'm comfortable doing it because I absolutely love tarpon fishing. That to me probably is my number one passion for our fishery. But we have so much to see in Charlotte Harbor with Boca Grande, the beaches, and some of the best tarpon fishing really happens after all of the quote unquote tarpon season. And that takes us in July, August, September, and much of that happens in the harbor. And not a lot of people know that. I wish more people did, because there's a lot of really good tarpon guides in Charlotte Harbor, and there probably should be more tarpon fishermen in Charlotte Harbor in those months. But
and it would help your calendar out.
It would. I mean, look, at the end of tarpon season for me, let's go like right before ICAST, I'm ready for some AC. I'm not even going to joke about that. I'm ready to hey, where's the AC at? And chill for a bit. I get that opportunity really in August. I still tarpon fish. I juvenile tarpon fish a lot up in Charlotte Harbor. Those 5 to 20 pounders on light tackle.
Yep.
God, if I could figure out how to do that year round, it could be scary. But no, man, I from catching tarpon and artificial to catching them live bait and crabs and the whole deal, I do it all. And I just want people to experience what I experienced on my first tarpon, which was in Charlotte Harbor. It was actually in the mouth of the river. And when their eyeballs are as big around as saucers, because that thing comes jumping out of the water, that's what it's about for me. And I still get all jazzed up for other people's tarpon.
So what, obviously first recommendation is to book a captain. And I would tell anyone that. I mean, we've had a place in Placida. We grew up with our dad, a guy that worked for him had a little house, one of the original homes on Little Gasparilla Island. So I've been going there since I was a kid, caught a lot of tarpon. But, I mean, there are many days out there where, I mean, you're seeing them rolling everywhere. I mean, they're daisy chaining, like they're like all over the beach, and I can't get a single one to bite. So first and foremost, hire a guide if you really want to go out there and consistently catch them. But for the weekend warrior who's out there, maybe how about this? Because I know it is completely different right now, like fall time. What are you doing? Are you still catching little juvenile tarpons?
Yeah, so honestly, our focus is changed a little bit. I was really dialed in with the juvenile tarpon, all through July, August, September. As we peeked into October, that red for October seems to come around, and there are still juvenile tarpon to be found and caught. A lot of them have pushed closer to the rivers, the mouth of the rivers. The fish that we were seeing in the backcountry, they're not as prevalent anymore. The water temperature has cooled just a bit. Seems like the hotter the water, the better they love it. But now that we're into mid-October, I don't really target them as much. I have people call me and ask me for tarpon trips in January. That's a tough one. But and I just give them the real sauce on that, whether, I'm probably more upfront and honest, and then it probably costs me more trips than it does long term, at least in my mind it does. But I just tell people the reality of it. I understand you want to catch tarpon, but in January that could be a tough gig. Doesn't say it doesn't exist. I mean, I know guys that catch them up in the rivers fairly consistently in the wintertime.
Yep.
But it's just not my game, right? I spend 5 months out of the year, looking for those jokers and fishing for them. So I know that I really want to have the opportunity to put those people on some fish. And right now in October, I think we would be better off to go look for some snook or redfish for some activity, some numbers. And our fishery right now, Joe, I don't know about it in Tampa, but man, I tell you what, Charlotte Harbor is alive, buddy. It is happening everywhere. Everybody I've been talking to is doing well. They're catching some really quality fish. Our redfish schools of redfish that I haven't seen in honestly years, and numbers are here. And I can't explain it. I've had people, sit me down. It's like, okay, we had some of the worst water we've ever had last fall. We had an awful kingfish season here. We had an awful late fall live bait situation, right? And then this year, so far so good. It has been incredible. So I'm cautiously optimistic, Joe, that, outside of the, other water issues that we have in Charlotte Harbor and in Florida in general, I think all those need to be addressed. But I don't think for a minute that somebody in Ohio or Michigan or Illinois needs to say, you know what, do I need to come to Florida and go fishing? The answer is yes.
Heck yeah. No, absolutely.
You absolutely do, because the fishery right now is super on fire.
Yep. And so much of it starts with bait, right? And we went out with FWC for that day and obviously picked their brain a lot. And the bait's coming back. I mean, it's not like it was, prior to all the red tide and a lot of the mess, but it's good. I mean, because we have that condo in Placida, not too far from you, and Luke was living in Bokeelia. And I mean, as some of the most abundant pinfish and biggest pinfish I've ever seen in my life, like the bait is definitely coming back, which, helps out the predator fish and this helps out the whole ecosystem. So,
I really look forward to a really solid kingfish season this year. And I think the guys that are going grouper fishing this year and this fall and heading into December,
Yep.
I think we're going to find some great numbers for some gag groupers. Now, they'll likely be going further than me. I do not possess a reef permit, so you're not likely to see my self out past that where I'm not going to get in trouble.
Yep.
But the beauty about our fishery is when the water cools, I get the opportunity to catch some gags in that 45 foot of water that sometimes hurts your feelings sometimes. So, that's my type of fishing. Fortunately, because, like we said earlier, I have that HPX, that Maverick, that allows me to fish in the backcountry and sight fish for some tail and redfish. And sometimes the water is so low, like when we go out in negative tide and the wind's blowing northeast 15 to 20. Those are the days when my client calls me in the morning, are we still fishing today? Absolutely we are. You better be at the ramp because you're going to catch them. And sometimes the nastiest days on those low tides, we'll catch fish.
Yep.
Because there's no water and all the fish that are on those grass flats fall into these sand holes and they're basically trapped, and we're going to present some baits to them to catch them. But that near shore fishery for me really kicks off in that November, December, in the early part of the year. And it's a lot of fun. And the folks that want to keep fish for dinner, some mangrove snapper, some triple tail, I'm all about catch and release. In fact, I probably do much more catch and release than anything. In fact, currently my Pathfinder doesn't even have a fillet knife in it. But I understand people want to have some dinner. Hey, I'm all for it. Let's just, catch what you're going to eat that tonight, or keep what you're going to eat tonight.
Yep. It's good. Good way of thinking through it, or thinking about it. And I think, it's kind of, it's tough right now for captains in some of that area, but then again, I think a lot of it's the mindset, right? Because I've heard some people who are from up north saying, "Oh, I don't want to come down, I can't keep anything." But really, end of the day, is that really why you're coming down, just to be able to catch, to keep the fish? You come down to catch and have a good time. And like Jay said, fish has been on fire. That's really what you're coming down for, is the tight lines, not to be able to go back and take a fillet back. And man, the tight lines. And sick.
No, 100%. That's exactly right. And I use the whole catch and release thing right now as a way to educate a little bit too.
Yep.
And when I was in Ohio, and I know a lot of people from the Midwest, they go to Lake Erie and they're going to catch their limit of walleye the best they possibly can and fill the coolers as much as they possibly can. Well, that mindset changes a little bit in Florida. And, we have a strong tourism industry, and yes, that is nice to be able to take some fish home for dinner. I get it. But what keeps you coming back is the tug. The tug is a drug here, buddy. And if you can keep people with bent rods and having fun, and that right there should be what you're coming to Florida to experience, not the taste of a speckled trout.
Yep.
And that's just my philosophy on it. And I've been a catch and release guy for many years. Don't get me wrong, I've filleted my fair share of fish, right? But if we're going to be able to help sustain this fishery, catch them and let them go is a good thing too. And when people understand, how many eggs a particular snook will have during the spawn, that you can start putting that in perspective.
Yep.
To that one meal at night, and it really comes full circle. So I use that a little bit. I love, I just did the redfish release with CCA, that redfish recovery program they did.
Yep.
I was one of the guys there that helped release 10,000 redfish right out of Coral Creek. That gets me all warm and fuzzy right there.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know what's going to happen. Those redfish grow like 8 inches a year, man. So our fishery, I'm like I said earlier, I'm cautiously optimistic. I love some of the things that are happening on the grassroots side. There's some really good organizations that are, taking a note on making some changes. With CCA's help and that Duke Energy thing is is really helping too with those releases. So I think they're even talking about doing some releases on the East Coast. So we'll see. But again, if your listeners are thinking about doing some fishing and coming to Florida, Florida is on fire.
Oh, yes. So leads me to the next question. Where do they reach you? Well, I know you got the guidelinesTV.com. What about your site for booking charters and stuff?
Yeah, so my charter site is CaptainJ.com. It's CaptJay.com. I'm super accessible online. If you just type my name in, Captain J Withers, online, Google search it, there's a million things come up. So I'm very active there. Certainly Instagram, Facebook, all over those. So yeah, I'm super accessible. I make myself accessible for people that have questions. Sometimes they have no desire to actually do a charter or fish. They just have a question about, something they heard or whatever. So I find myself answering the phone all the time. But that's just a way for me to try to give back to what, this fishery has done for me and what this industry has done for me. And any little tidbits I can share, I'm always happy to. But yeah, have people visit CaptainJ.com or GuidelinesTV.com. And if you do watch the show, any of you watch the show and you see it on Facebook or Instagram or on Waypoint, comment, send messages. I respond to everything.
Yes.
So it's, as you know, it's super important to be interactive. So I'm all about that.
Yeah,
so
and I was super impressed how quick you got back with me. I shot you because I saw something. You won some cool award, I think, for the show. And I just saw you holding a trophy or some plaque, and I was like, I'm going to shoot him a message because I kept hearing your name, and then someone mentioned you, and then I saw the thing. I was like, all right, I shoot a message, and like, boom, you got back so quick, and we made this happen. So yeah, definitely, and we'll put all his links I know a lot of our listeners listen in the car, so if you can't memorize all that, just at saltstrong.com, you'll see this episode, and it's always at saltstrong.com/podcast if you need an exact URL, but you can find it right there on our home site. And we'll have this Captain J Withers guidelines post up there at top, and we'll have all the links there where you can get a hold of him, book charters, subscribe to the show, follow him on Instagram and YouTube and all the social media places. But are you most active on Instagram if you had to pick one?
Yeah, probably most active on Instagram, both through guidelines and through my personal page, but my personal page is a little bit of everything that I do. I mean, you'll see pictures of my dogs, you'll see pictures of fish, you'll see small videos I put on there about rigging techniques, a little of everything. And guidelines, same way. You just get a little different perspective on both sides. But yeah, Instagram certainly is a big fan. It's kind of one of those necessary evils. I find myself, like you probably, I spend a little bit too much time on it sometimes, I feel, but it's important, and it's a great way to be interactive with folks that are either following it or watching the show. I've had people watch the show and have questions about a particular style of knot that I've used. Small little details like that, I'm glad to see that they don't go unnoticed. And those are the things that I love being able to share, the little things that make all of it come together.
Yep, I love it, dude. Well, we're going to have to, I know we went over, we're going to have to get you back on. You're super easy to talk to and, man, a great educator and just an overall awesome person. So thank you, Captain J, so much for the time. And, I can't wait for everyone to hear this and to check you out and make sure to follow you. And I can't wait to see what you have in store for Guidelines, the show, going forward.
Joe, I appreciate this opportunity to be on the podcast with you. You guys are rocking it at Salt Strong. I got to tell you, as I mentioned before, it's good to see, what your platform has done for the fishing industry, and just hats off to you guys. And again, quite an honor to be with you.
No, thank you, brother. You're the man. Guys, everyone, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. If you made it this far, you're really awesome. I know we went a little bit over, but this was just a great episode. And please go follow Jay Withers and Guidelines everywhere that you possibly can. Guys, we're out. I will talk to you on the next episode. Peace.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul.